Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Frameworks Neynar workshop building on Farcaster with Neynar. Joining us today is Rish, who will be taking us through this session. And with that, I'll pass it over to Rish to get the session started.
Hey, thanks, Rory. Thanks for having me here. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Um, we'll be walking us through Neynar. If you have questions while I'm going through, feel free to throw them in the chat. Also, feel free to unmute and just ask. I'll be going through the chat periodically and just like look through what questions are there. And yeah, let's get started. I hope everybody is having a good time at the hackathon. Excited to be supporting this and excited to be building on frames. So with that, we'll quickly talk through what we do on Neynar. You can walk through with me on your computer if you want. It's just neynar.com. I don't have like specific slides or something. I'm going to be kind of doing this live. So we'll walk through a bunch of products and how you can build frames. So Neynar today is specifically focused on Farcaster infrastructure, obviously including frames, but does everything related to Farcaster, reads, writes, nodes, which is hubs, APIs, signer management, hosted index databases, webhooks, SQL playgrounds, fully focused on with the Farcaster data today. And I'll quickly walk through what stuff you can use specifically with frames and some things that I think could be interesting, specifically when building with Neynar. So for frames today, we offer a few different things. If you go to docs.neynar.com, which is this website here, you'll see we have some guides, some of them specifically focused on frames, and some APIs. I'll start with the APIs because the guides you guys can read on your own time. I'll do the API live walkthrough. There are two sets of APIs that I'll touch on in the beginning, and then I'll pause for questions. The first set is if you are building a custom frame on your end, we have a validation API that you can use to validate data that you get back from an interactor on a frame. So if a user interacts with your frame, you can it's signed. The interaction signed by the signer on the app they're interacting from, and you can use a hub endpoint to validate that message. What the Neynar API provides on top of the hub endpoint is that it'll hydrate a bunch of stuff for you, so you don't have to make extra API calls to get the same data. So in this example, and you can try this live on the website, by the way, on this example, we have the signed message bytes from a frame interaction. And if you pass these flags as true, what it'll do is that not only will it validate the frame action for you and tell you whether it's a valid action or not, but it'll also tell you who interacted with the frame, and it'll give you the full user object, like who the person is, how many followers they have, if they have connected addresses. It'll tell you whether the person interacting with the frame follows or not the creator of the frame, so who casted out the frame. And that way, if it's a frame that's checking for, hey, you have to follow before you can interact, or if you have to do something else, all of that is returned in the same validation response. It'll also tell you whether the interactor of the frame has reacted to the frame itself. So if the frame is in a cast and the frame is asking for like, hey, you have to like or recast or reply to this cast before you can interact with the frame, all of that data is part of the same validation response. And then finally, for transaction frames, one of the things we found when transaction frames launched is that there's a lot of like potentially bad actors who try to ping the frame server from unknown clients in order to get access to whatever the transaction is. And so if you pass the signer context flag, it'll tell you which app the interaction originated from. So if it's Warpcast or Supercast or Feeds or any of these other apps, you'll be able to know exactly which app it's coming from. So if it's not a known app, there's a chance that somebody's just pinging your frame server directly, trying to get access to this transaction, and you can start filtering those out. And that is passed as part of the signer context. It's all in the same validation API, and you can just validate end-to-end any frame interaction without making multiple API calls, and let the user move on to the next step without either slowing down because you're making too many calls or giving them extra steps to go through to prove they're a real user and so on. That's the validation API. There's a action API that we have, where if you are hosting a frame, let's say you're hosting a frame on your client, or you have a web page where you want people to come in and interact with the frame on a surface you own, anytime you make or the user takes an action on your frame, you need to post that action to a hub. And for that, we have this API where we abstract away signer management, we abstract away posting to the hub, and you can just come in, sign up, get a signer UUID for that user, and you can start posting frame actions and host frames on your product. Supercast, for example, runs frames, and they are built on Neynar. And anytime you interact with a frame on Supercast, it's going through these Neynar APIs and hubs. Let me quickly pause there. There are some other frame APIs we have that I'll touch on in a second, but just want to see if there are questions. Yeah, you could create a light. So I don't know if everybody can see the question, so I'll just read it out loud. There's a question around, could we create a light client for Farcaster? The answer is yes. Pretty much every client on Farcaster is built on Neynar. I know of maybe one that's not, but it still uses Neynar hubs underneath instead of the whole set of APIs. So pretty much every client uses Neynar in some way. And yes, it is possible to create a light client for Farcaster. Like I have in the tagline for this talk, I think this is like Neynar is probably the easiest way to make it. You could make a client without Neynar, but you'll just have to work directly against the hubs. And that's way more work, especially for a hackathon. And yeah, if you end up creating a client for Farcaster, you can then use these APIs to host and render frames and let your users take action on them. Other questions? Yep, would make sense for a video game. Okay. While we wait for questions, I'll walk over another set of frame tools that we have on the infra side. So another thing we have noticed is that in some cases, when developers build frames, they don't really need a very complicated frame, but they need a simple frame joined together with something else. So for example, if you have a bot and that bot is taking some action based on whatever the user is doing, you want the bot to cast out a frame. And this could be like a bot responding to a game, a bot responding to a set of keywords. And instead of the bot just giving out a text response, you want it to be a rich response and you want a simple frame in it. So I'll touch on two things here. One, if you want to build a bot, we have a guide here which talks about where is it? How to create a Farcaster bot, this one. And this is pretty much the simplest way to build a bot. You just go into dev.neynar.com, you generate a signer UUID, no need to write code, you just get the signer UUID, and you start writing with that signer UUID programmatically, and that's your bot. And there's like a whole instruction set here. There's a sample bot repo you can use from our example repo, and you can get a bot running in like 2 minutes. And now once you have a bot, let's say you want the bot to cast out simple frames in response to something. What happens today is that the previous frame APIs I showed you here, validate and post, they still require you to like make the whole frame stack. So you'll need to go to Vercel, you'll need to host your meta tags, you'll need to connect Vercel to this like validate API, and then your bot can start casting these frames out, or whatever client or application you're building can start casting these frames out. What we have here is we have a set of APIs where if you want to make a frame, you just send us a JSON object that has the title, the image, and the buttons, and we'll give you back a frame URL. And the frame is hosted. We take care of the hosting. We take care of the rendering. You just give us the data and you get a frame back. And you can put in as many, we call them pages, but essentially as many steps as you want in the frame. You can have the buttons linked to one another, and just make one API call, give us that data in a JSON blob, and we'll give you back a frame URL, and you can now surface that frame URL. So you can take that frame URL, it's just frames.neynar.com/a short UUID. You can embed that in your bot response, and when your bot writes out, it's now programmatically generating frames without you having to like post those frames somewhere, think about how to render them and whatnot. And on the hosting stack, Varun, who's the co-founder of Farcaster, there's a cast he made. I should pull it up if I can find it, which is our frame stack is twice as fast as any other frame stack. Like responses are on average of 18 milliseconds, and that's average. The lowest response time can be as low as like 5 to 8 milliseconds. So when you tap a response, like tap a button, it just renders back the next thing. So if you're programmatically creating frames, it's on a stack that's super optimized to do exactly this, and abstracts away a bunch of the work that you would otherwise have to do. So that's the other frame thing we have here. Happy to answer questions on this, or how to connect them with bots, or how to make a bot, and so on. So let me pause there for a second. Any questions? Okay, we'll keep moving. One other thing that might be useful to cover while we are going through this is we have also seen developers using webhooks to make the frame experience better, where they'll ask the user to do something, to go through a frame, take some interaction, like follow a channel or respond to a cast or something. And you can programmatically set up a webhook that pings your server and says, hey, this action has now happened. And based on that action, you can respond back to the user, either with a cast or with a cast that has a frame. And you can make like pretty complicated, rich experiences out of this, where there's a full user journey. You want the user to do something, they see a frame, you respond back with a different frame, and the infrastructure exists to do all of that programmatically. So you can create webhooks, you can update, delete, and respond based on webhooks. If it's a simple webhook you're making, you don't even need to write code for it. We have a webhook section in our dev portal. So once you sign up, you can go to dev.neynar.com, and there's a webhook section here, and you can just go in, turn webhooks on and off, figure out what you want the webhook to deliver on, and just set it up here. And that's about it. No need to write code. And your webhook will deliver to the API of to the backend API of your choice. That also helps create pretty rich frame and Farcaster experiences overall. Let me pause there and see if you guys have any questions on that. Cool. Yeah, definitely don't be shy. If you don't have questions, also feel free to throw out ideas of what you're looking to build. And I can cover stuff in our stack that could be useful for you to look at as you're going through this. Because right now I'm just going off of like what I've seen people generally do. But if we know more specifics, that might be helpful. Outside of that, I think for people who are looking to try, I already put this out there on the Frameworks hackathon page, but we have a code that'll allow you to sign up for free. So you don't have to worry about signing up for a paid user. It's just that our account creation is tied to Stripe webhooks. So we have to get a Stripe webhook to automatically create the account. But you won't have to pay for it, and it's okay if you cancel after the hackathon. So just use that code to sign up if you need. And then you should be able to use all of this. One other thing that I'll talk about is we have the SQL Playground, and I've seen people do interesting things with that as well, where you can come in and kind of query for interesting data sets. So let's say you want to fetch users who have casted in a certain channel or who have casted about a certain topic. You can just like write the query here. I'll write a simple one now. And get back a list of users that you can export. And then you can limit the frame interactions to only those users, where if you go use our validation API, if it doesn't match exactly that user set, then you can just say like, hey, you're not allowed to use this frame, and then just stop them there. And we have also seen people build like gated frames in this way. That can also be quite interesting. Let's see. Any questions or any ideas of what people are looking to build? Okay. No more questions there. I think one last thing to cover here may be that you can use all of this through our Node.js SDK. So if you're not looking to like ping the APIs directly or like have any kind of Axios or whatever in your Node stack, you can just install the Node.js SDK and that'll give you access to all the same APIs. We have a bunch of examples apps, like I said, that can help you get started quicker. And let's see, there's a question here about if we can integrate PWAs with Farcaster using Neynar. Yeah, if I'm understanding your question correctly, it's just integrating Farcaster to like a web page that turns into a progressive web app. So yes, you can. Supercast, for example, which is this app here, supercast.xyz, they have a progressive web app. This app fully runs on Neynar, by the way. And yeah, you can change this to a PWA and use Neynar in the background. What are you looking to do? EtherCalc. Can you tell us more about what that is? Feel free to also just come off mute and say it out loud. I don't know if there's Rory, if there's some kind of limitation on people being able to unmute.
There
Seems
shouldn't be. Let me check.
but otherwise, yeah, if you can't unmute, just throw it in the chat.
It says participants, you're able to unmute yourself, so not sure why. Let me see.
Yeah, if you can't unmute, just throw it in the chat. Might be local to that Zoom app. But yeah, other people should also feel free to throw in questions. We can do a Q&A kind of thing in the last 10 minutes, depending on. And even if you're not using Neynar, by the way, if you're building something else, we've been building on Farcaster for a long time.
Hi,
Yeah,
sorry for the interruption. Yeah, now I just got the unmute button. First of all, thank you so much for the session. Very nicely explained. Wish to ask you, basically, we are trying to use the SQL query system to fetch basically user personalized data for certain areas around like I would say SEOs and marketing lists. So we are trying to create a customer list on EtherCalc with integration with Neynar, basically. So I was just wondering whether we can integrate a PWA that we are creating using EtherCalc on Farcaster using Neynar. So that was my key question, basically.
When you say integrate EtherCalc on Farcaster, can you elaborate? Do you mean enable Farcaster data into EtherCalc, or do you want to add EtherCalc to like Warpcast or something?
Both ways. So both ways. First, we would definitely love to use Neynar to fetch the data from Farcaster, feed it into EtherCalc. Then also, I mean, we are able to generate short URLs, which could be shared with anyone on Farcaster. I mean, these are EtherCalc URLs. Again, where we'll to use Neynar for like the entire hooking mechanism, where we could share notifications, we could do a variety of things, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, you can do that both ways. So for example, if you're looking to to fetch data, you can check if the API serve your purpose. If the API serve your purpose, that's already great because they are like tuned to have the right performance, the right kind of relevance and so on. If you're looking for very custom data that the APIs don't already serve, then you can write queries in our playground, and there is an API that allows you to use the playground over API. And there's a guide for this here. One sec. At the bottom that says how to use the Neynar SQL playground. And there's one over SQL over API. So you can use the SQL over API and serve custom data into EtherCalc. And then pushing EtherCalc data back to Farcaster, you can use, like you said, notifications or webhooks for like finding the right time when you want to push that data back. And then you can use our write APIs to push the data back. And you can embed frames in it if you want. Like I was saying, embedding simple frames is why we have these like frame APIs where you can just create frames on the fly. And otherwise, you can use these like post-cast APIs where we'll do the signer management and all of that, and you can just put in the text of the cast, and you'll be able to write it back to the protocol.
Great. Thank you so much for the kind answer.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Hi, Rish. I'm Vyacheslav Smirnov. We talked a bit before from the Toasty account. So we're looking as well to integrate Neynar into our FGE frame-generated engine, and we would like to understand how we can connect from this side. So we developed FGE to allow users without any code knowledge base to create frames. So they just need to fill all the information in the Google spreadsheet, and frames will be automatically generated by the Google APIs and hosted on our server. So it's nice. It's working for the simple cases such as like providing the flow of frames, like connect frames with each other. But it's not good if we will provide like variables inside it. So we tried already like to do many variable things. You can even like to provide your own pixels to set up a variable on the pixel frame, like a matrix. But the question is how we can solve the thing of dynamic variable that can be provided by the users. So we need like to provide a database, abstract database already available, and like with the microservices that who will like update this data from the blockchain from time to time and render it to the user, and user can use this variable on Google Spreadsheet. So I'm thinking how we can use Neynar at this point.
Yeah, Google Spreadsheet is a pretty limited interface where the data obviously exists on Neynar, but for you to like push and pull directly from Google Spreadsheets is probably more complicated than it would be from a simple app. The simplest way to do this, it would be for Google Spreadsheet to for you to have a proxy server in between, where the only thing Google needs to interact with is your proxy server. And then your proxy server pings the Neynar server, knows what data to push and pull, and then massages it back into a shape that Google Spreadsheets will accept. Because
actually we do that.
Okay,
we do absolutely the same as you mentioned right now. I'm about the global thing. About the Google Spreadsheet, it's limited interface, but it's good like for usability of the users who don't need to know the coding skills, right? I'm about the like dynamic thing. When, for example, user want to put on an image random data from Farcaster, for example, last his followings, and we like to put this code in the Google spreadsheet as variable or something, like to put it on the image. It's
like that's pretty rough. Usually we use Satori, where Satori takes in the variables and renders an image on the fly with it and pushes it out to a frame. I honestly don't know how to do this in Google Spreadsheet. I'll have to check. Haven't done this kind of stuff on Google Sheets, but it's a good question.
Doing proxy.
On proxy, you should be able to do it with Satori and push the Satori image to Imgur, and Imgur can push the link to Google Spreadsheet, if that's the way you want to do it.
We already did that. I mean, Google Spreadsheet is just to provide like static data from the user, right? But on the back end, you should have like a variable that will be auto-updated as the user wants it. So I think
let's think. Why don't you message me after this?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'll
For anybody, by the way, on the call, if you just want to find me after, I'm just warpcast.com/Rish. My DMs are open. You should be able to just send me a message, and we can go from there. I think we are about at time. If there's any last questions, feel free to throw it in the chat and I'll quickly address. But otherwise, I think that's about it.
Yeah, if there are any questions, please type them in the chat. We can go a little over.
Okay. Yeah, feel free to DM me questions, drop them in the chat. Also, feel free to come off mute in the last minute or so if you have some other ideas.
But yeah, if there are no other questions, Rish, thanks for a great workshop and presentation. And
Absolutely.
yeah, as everybody said, or as he said, please feel free to reach out to him if you have any other further questions.
Yeah. And I'll drop I think this is the code we came up with. So you should be able to sign up for Neynar with this code that gives you a free access. If it doesn't work, just ping me on Workcast. Cool. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Cheers. Everybody have a great rest of your day. And yeah, see you for more workshops this afternoon.